Hello, minions, henchmen, and future overlords in training. I'm sure we have seating somewhere. Just clear off the color from the old Death Ray. Welcome to Lair of Secrets Podcast. It's a podcast about exploring the sprawling caverns of gaming, hidden treasures of geekdom, and the unexpected intersections of reality. I am David Moore, and I got to game over the weekend. I played some Monster of the Week with Rev from the Crit Show podcast, and a lot of West End Games D6 Star Wars from the Sparks campaign.
I am Chris Miller, and I am back from a weekend writing retreat, and I have ideas.
And I'm Ken Newquist, and I'm super jealous of Chris's weekend writing retreat. But I also was creative and created the best, worst map ever, as has been told to me by not one, but two sets of players.
Yes,
and
you did.
We're going to talk about it now.
Yes, you did.
Absolutely.
So let me set up the worst, best map ever. I wrote a Mothership one-shot scenario called the Emerald Palace, which took place on an undersea water research station on Europa, below the moon's icy surface. Heavily inspired by movies like The Abyss, Underwater, Leviathan, Deep Star 6, Deep Blue Sea. It involved building an underwater facility that's floating in the ocean of Europa, and it was loosely divided into 4 modules, right? Like a docking arm where the submarines come and dock, social space that is the mess hole. It should have been a mess hole. A mess hall, the fish bowl, which is like one of those nice glass enclosures where you can go out and see the wonder that is the oceans of Europa. Green space, a kitchen, and there was the habitation and workspace, which is a science lab and moon pool, barracks, workshop, that kind of thing. And then ops, which is, of course, central operations, med bay, security, the brig, armory, secure storage space. I had this all floating around in my head. I got back. I was going to run it for David and Chris. And so I sat down, I sketched it out real quick and rolled 20. And then just like an hour before the adventure, but I knew it, roughly speaking, how things were going to be laid out because I'd had some other sketches and what have you. And so it's all good. Made it in time. We ran it. and then I ran it again at Mepicon. And the reaction, I think, was the same from both crews. But what was your guys' take on the best, worst map ever?
Who designed this place? What lame-ass industrial designer put together this underwater? This is terrible. But it was also awesome because you could totally see a corporation putting together something that didn't make sense. Like it had all the right parts, and like someone put them together in the wrong order or something. So it kind of even fit the story. And I know that wasn't intentional, but it was really great because it got us all. I mean, I've not been in a lot of games where we talked about the map extensively while we were playing. And that was one where we did because it presented challenges.
So David, do you want to share the map?
Yeah, I'll share the map. The thing that I think we came up with verisimilitude-wise was we really thought that this map here that's coming up was designed with cost in mind. It was brought in modules and just connected together. It was really efficient from a cost standpoint, not really from we're having some sort of emergency and have to get from one area to another safely, especially not if we're in a movie like Deep Blue Sea or Leviathan. That's not necessarily in most of your corporate boardroom considerations, but the cost aspect of this definitely an issue.
I mean, the fact that you have to get to the lab by going through the kitchen was a point of contention, if I remember correctly.
Yep.
We had to go through the mess hall, I think, to get to the lab. So,
right. I want to pause us here for just a minute because I really would like you to go into like Incarnate or whichever mapping system you want to use and flesh this out. And I would love for this to get written up and for us to release it.
Yes.
So if anybody wants to not get spoiled on this adventure for Mothership, then come back later. But yeah, because I think we're going to walk through why this is such a bad design for that module.
So sitting at the bottom of this, so I have to say, so I walked through the modules previously, and so I think individually those make sense, and those like operational clusters kind of make sense. And the setup for the adventure was basically there's a mayday from a submarine that is coming in hot to the station. There's a skeleton crew on the station because cost-cutting measures. We haven't found anything interesting on Europa, so the governments and corporations are pulling out of the moon. The players are like the last ones left behind, and they have various competing interests around that because, Mothership, also heavily inspired by aliens, right? And so you've got this sub that's coming in hot with some sort of alien life form on board. There's people who are in various states of not goodness. They may be serving injured as like they're injured, right? You don't know exactly what's happening. And I may confuse the two scenarios because you guys went very different ways. But in any case, you have somebody coming in hot and you have to figure out, okay, well, how are we going to contain this? How are we going to get them to the science lab, right? So that we can do the sciencey stuff, because obviously that's what you want to do. Now, I will say, in my own defense, there were lots of ways that this could have gone, including you guys just decide to, figure out how to blow up the sub outside of the station, right? So there's lots of things that could have happened in alternative modes. But in this one, we have the docking arm at the bottom, right? Which is where the sub, so including your own docking sub, is docked. Right.
And we have two little subs to either side, Nessie and Champ.
And then you have the the open spot is where the Corpo sub comes in to dock. And then just north to this is the fishbowl, which is your rest and relaxation area, right? Like that's kind of reasonable. Like you kind of you're coming off your sub and you get to see this beautiful underwater scene, right? And then off to the side is the green space, off to the right, and then off to the left. Well, you need the pantry, right? Because you got to store your dry goods and Pop-Tarts somewhere. And then going up a little bit, there's the kitchen. Then of course there's the mess hall, because you would come in from the green space. Why wouldn't you have the mess hall right nearby? Because then you could just you could take your Pop-Tart and you could just go and look out upon the wonders of Europa, right, with the floodlights and what have you. Like that's a nice scene, right? And there's that green space where you could just kind of hang out. Totally
and this is from a corporate standpoint, they could just stamp this whole thing out as multiple separate modules that combined into one module that they deliver and then can get hooked into something else. Right. But so when you have injured people, not even thinking about extraterrestrials, but just think about you've got injured people with blood not in their body anymore, and then you have to take them through the mess hall in order to get all the way to the other end of the station to the med bay, way up here.
Yes,
not real well thought out on that sense.
Right, because the next section is the moon pool, which obviously that's going to have all the hardware and stuff because you have to go out and do EVAs. It's got the ROV hangar, right? You've got the workshop because obviously you need to work on these things. The ROVs are going to break. You're going to need your tools nearby. You got the science lab just off to the north of the moon pool, and a co-working space because obviously you want to be close to where all the action's happening. And then there's the barracks because you're going to sleep where you work, right? So why you want efficiency here, right? Like this is a nice self-contained operational module, right?
Someone wants efficiency here.
Somebody wants efficiency.
I still have nightmares. I still have nightmares about what happened at the moon pool.
Yeah. This is almost two different modules, actually. Like if you look at it, because this module, most everything is reconnected, but this is workshop, moon pool, ROV hangar module, and then the next one is co-working space with barracks on one side and science lab on the other, so people can work there. And so again, you have an alien now that you now have to take from the docking arm through the fishbowl, the mess hall, past the moon pool, through the co-working space, and finally into the science lab. But you don't want to contaminate the station.
Right. So I believe that it's been a little while. I should have just double checked my notes, but I believe they were infected who were on board the ship, right? On board the submarine. And so they hadn't done the alien thing, like David and I have said before, steal liberally, right? So obviously there's a whole parasite life cycle type thing going on because that's how this thing reproduces on Europa, right? Takes control of its life. It wants to get to a place so it can infect more hosts. And then I think it takes control of one of them to become this hunter mode type thing so that it can infect more hosts, right? So have a nice life cycle thought out. And you guys, I forget, did you guys tell the docking group that they had to put everybody in body bags and like do self-contained science?
Yes, we put. Go ahead, Chris.
Wasn't that I believe that was Mr. Johnson. I believe that he was the one sticking to the letter of the alien decontamination sequence in the book, and was reading things out. It was very funny. He did a really great job. But there was we were using body bags as quarantine, more or less.
Yep,
it was like
because they were sealed
for it, right? Yes.
Yeah, they were sealed. We put those into the airlock. They put those in. They put the bodies in there, and they weren't like body bags for dead people. They were also kind of like stasis sort of things because they did have a living person in one of them, which is where Chris is getting the nightmares from the moon pool, which we'll explain in a minute. So we ended up getting those bodies in, and so we had locked our side of the airlock so that we could take these bodies out, but the rest of the people who were still moving around in the sub could not come in. We thought we were being really smart and making sure that there was no contamination or anything else like that. And really we were. It was just the design of this map really made things difficult. Like there was a stasis. I think you said there was like a stasis bed or a stasis field in the science lab.
Yes.
So like it would kind of freeze metabolic processes.
I'm not sure we ever got there.
We didn't. I
don't remember.
There.
No. I think the other crew did.
No, we went through the fishbowl. We got to the mess hall, and something started happening inside the body bag. And as we moved into the moon pool, we saw something burst out of the person in the body bag. And it was very messy. And we decided we aren't going to be able to make it to the science lab. So the body bag went into the moon pool, and we shuttered the iris shut the moon pool. And then, indeed, we would not have made it to the science lab. As not just one, but multiple things ripped through the body bag. Ken described it in a horrible way, saying that the person inside was also still alive. Definitely a Mothership horror sort of game. They weren't alive for long, luckily.
Yes, they were put out of misery pretty quickly. So
that was like the beginning.
Yes. Yeah, I think we got about halfway through. I don't think we got to the conclusion. The other crew did, and they got to meet Nicole Nova, who was the corpo, who was like, trying to call down rank. I think
right.
Mr.
She was on the
went
sub
toe to toe with her. Yeah, so she was infected too. So she just like Hulk smashed, and so there was all kinds of stuff that was going on and like breaking through the glass and what have you. So I will say, when I was setting the scenario up, the things I explicitly wanted to do was play the meta game of like, yes, most of us have seen Alien. Most of us have seen the monster movie where someone is infected and protocol says, don't let them in. So what happens if you don't let them in? Like, that would have also been a very fun variant on this, because other stuff would have happened, right? Because then everybody on the sub would have been infected, and like within a day or three, you would have had some real problems. But it was cool because both groups, after running through it, were like, I hate this map. This is a terrible map. Who would design it like this? Everybody, like, they were saying, the Mepicon group was saying exactly the same things that you guys were saying. And then we got to the end of it, and their reaction was the same: was don't change anything.
Yeah. That was the end of ours. Was like, oh, you're going to run this at Mepicon? Yeah, don't change this map at all. They're going to hate it too, and it's going to be amazing. Because at one point the fishbowl got ruptured, and I think we were like in the green space, and all of these connector tubes can iris shut.
Right.
But notice, in order for us to leave, we have to get to Champ or Nessie. And so that means we'd have to somehow get through the fishbowl, or, around. And I think for some reason the mess hall was like halfway flooded or something along those lines.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, we had to end about there. but like our only chance at that point was to put on suits and go through the moon pool to try to get to Nessie or Champ, with the big bad already having smashed through the fishbowl. And basically, it's basically let's jump into the ocean with megalodons just waiting for us. It was not a happy ending for our crew.
Yeah. So the other thing that I learned after having run this, because I took a lot of liberties with the science. Basically, when you're thinking about the atmospheric, the water pressure at these depths, you have to actually account for the ice overhead. Which, if you do that, like you don't really get. It's more like the abyss in that case than it would be like deep blue sea. Deep blue sea is kind of like a surface level thing, and that's kind of what I was modeling. So I think if I were to do this again, I would do, or when I like finish writing this up, I would do it as like an ice world with a thinner shell, right? So that it's more closer to what I wanted.
I mean, I'm going to say this. I thought you did some good work with the science, as much as you could. However, I will say that your science was better than the Meg 2. In the Meg 2, they have these super hard suits, etc. In fact, at one point, one of them implodes because of all the pressure, and yet Jason Statham, he can go out there and just get a bloody nose without any sort of suit. Just holding his breath. Everything was fine.
Miles down. If you're the hero, you can do that a couple miles down, right? I don't think Mothership is that game.
Right. So,
so it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. But we wanted to talk, like, you designed this map over the course of, like, say, an hour or so. About an hour, I think, before the game started.
Yeah, I think I had sketched it out in a notebook, so because I had written the module, right? So I knew what all the components were, and I knew what was connected to what, but I hadn't actually turned into a thing we could use on Roll20. And as I went, I made some adjustments because I'm like, well, that doesn't make sense. I should do this, right? Like, oh, I need more connectors here, which is amusing afterwards.
Yep. But we also wanted to talk about designing maps, especially modern maps. Because a lot of us came up through D&D or fantasy games, and a lot of those are fairly easy because none of us lived during fantasy times or the Middle Ages or any of that stuff. And there are a few people that would point out, hey, these rooms are not accurate, but we could just say magic and it'd be okay. But when you get to modern day or near future, like cyberpunk, people are like, I know what an office looks like. I work in one every single day. Hopefully you don't, but hopefully you get to work remotely. But they know that they have buildings. They know they have bathrooms. Whereas how many fantasy castles that you've seen in D&D, how many bathrooms were in there? Probably 0 to none.
Because everybody had chamber pots, right? You could just hand wave the chamber pots.
Sure.
Yep, of course. Sure.
Magic. Yeah.
Magic. They didn't have showers. Are you kidding me? Everybody would just use like a barrel for water, right? But nobody actually cares because you're not actually getting into situations where you need to use the privy, right? Now, that having been said, in my Black Razor campaign, we had an outhouse for the Black Razors that we accounted for, and we put a bag of devouring at the bottom of the outhouse because nobody wanted to clean out the outhouse. So occasionally they'd lose a red shirt into the outhouse because somebody would get drunk and fall into the outhouse and get devoured by the bag of devouring. But you could do that in D&D because, why not? Right? Throwing a random black hole into a bathroom in Cyberpunk is not going to seem appropriate.
Well, yeah, I think it gets into people have expectations of things that are adjacent to what they think they know.
Yes.
I think, I remember when we were running our first Cyberpunk game and Aaron decided to go up into the vents. And there really weren't vents per se in that map, but you could extrapolate that they were there. because buildings have vents, because they just all do,
Yeah.
So you rolled with it, Ken, and that was great. But it was one of those things that clearly was like, we weren't really thinking about this. When we put
No,
this
there's
back
no
together.
vents. What are you talking about?
Yeah,
It's the future. There's no vents.
I'm sorry.
There's no ventilation.
vents, right.
Yeah. And I think that leads into a little bit of some other stuff where just because a map doesn't have it on there doesn't mean you can't theater of the mind sort of add it at the time, which is what happened.
Yeah, so I think we ran into this also in Scum and Villainy, where we were doing one of the adventures. We were raiding a science lab, and so and that was much more theater of the mind. And so I think we were as we were talking, in some ways theater of the mind just makes it a lot easier, right? Because you can just and Scum and Villainy lends itself to that kind of play, because it's not really a miniatures based game. It's much more about the heist and how you're getting to what you're doing and what have you, right? But you still start asking questions about like, well, it's a computer lab, right? Okay, so again, where are the vents? Is there AC? I think there should be a data safe somewhere. Is there one, right? Because you can make all of these assumptions about what might be here. I think you can probably do that for any game, but you can get more and more hand wavy the further you go into the past, or more fantastic, or further into the future, right? Like, well, no, there's no safes in the future. Why would you have that? It's all digital, right?
Right.
Like,
but yeah, so if you're closer to modern day, some of the things that we talked about was like, hey, this is a restaurant. Where's the freezer or food storage, or things like that? And honestly, what could be more cyberpunk than having a shootout in the bathroom between stalls and like shooting through the stall doors and things like that?
Yeah, and I think even just like science fiction, like think about the Blob, right? Like the 1986 version of the Blob. There's a prominent scene involving a restaurant. The Blob shows up and eats somebody in the kitchen sink. The two teenagers need to flee. Where do they flee? Well, they flee to the freezer, right? If you guys, spoilers, it's from like 1986, so I don't think I have to give too many. But let's just say, like, it becomes an important plot point because now you understand that the Blob doesn't actually like cold, right?
Right.
And more importantly, as the PCs are like, Jesus, we have to find some place to hide. And as players, you're going to say, well, we're in a restaurant. This is a big restaurant. There must be a walk-in freezer or something. Let's go find it, right? And so I think if you can think of some of those things ahead of time as you're designing the map, and I think this goes to one of the things we had up top, is when you're running the game, what are you doing, right? So are you doing a beautifully rendered three-dimensional map using Tailspire? Are you using a 2D map, also beautifully rendered? Because there's some amazing Patreons out there that will create wonderful layouts for you. Are you going to design it yourself using a tool like Incarnate or what have you? I've been on Incarnate a lot, right? Like, are you just going to hand draw it real quick using like drawing tools in your virtual tabletop? I think if you're giving them a physical representation of it, you need to think more about how do things connect, right? And you don't want to get too far down into that rabbit hole, but like, where's the power come in? Is there a back door? Are there bathrooms?
Yeah.
And I think the thing that's funny, if you think about what we were talking about previously with the world's best worst map, was if you don't have that there, it becomes like you automatically in game start wondering like, why don't you have this, right? Like, why aren't there any bathrooms in this freaking restaurant, right? And like, oh, well, everybody takes a leak, everybody just, it's that kind of place. They just go out and take a leak next to the wall outside, right? Or there's a ditch. Like, and that could be a very cyberpunk thing.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
and I certainly know from working downtown Chicago that a lot of places either the bathroom is only for paying customers or only for staff, and paying customers not even. And some of them don't really have bathrooms in that sense. You never see them.
But I think we've seen so I think that's the thing. Like in the modern era, it's easier to just start pulling in all of these tropes from the action movies that we've seen, right? So the relentless Terminator is coming to hunt you down. Where are you going to go hide? I'm going to go hide in the bathroom, right? Or like, we're going to blow up the other room. We need to go find the tub so that we can like hide in the tub, right? Like, what's the most reinforced place we can find, right? Or we're going to go into the storm cellar or what have you. Like the tropes immediately start to kick in in a way that I don't know that there are other tropes in fantasy and in sci-fi that would also kick in, but they wouldn't be where's the freezer.
Right. And I think that leads to like where you can remember those things. As you're creating a map, you might not think of I mean, we've said it to death, so you'll probably think of bathrooms now, but you might not think of like, oh, we're in an office. Where's the reception desk? Where's the server room or something along those lines? Where's the janitor closet? So look for inspirations in the real world. Look at office layouts. You can find office layouts or pictures of office layouts just about everywhere on the internet, or other places, like restaurants or other things like that. Some of the other places are pretty nice. If you want something a little more futuristic looking, would be more architectural renderings and other things like that. We'll generally have those things, and they'll also still have the necessities that would need to be there because they're showing these architecture drawings to people that would hopefully fund them to build them.
Right. So I think when you're thinking about your map and theater of the mind or zones, we're going to talk about zones in a bit, but like part of it, I think, and this is true for any map, is take a step back and wonder, like, what is the objective for this particular adventure or this particular scene, right? Like, what are you expecting the players trying to accomplish, and what skills are they bringing to it, right? So in our cyberpunk game, Omen's going to look for the vents, APT's looking for data jacks, Bob is probably going to want to look like for something that is suitably awesome to shoot from, like, nice and moody. Ooh, look, here's the smoke is coming from this area over here, or what have you, right? Like, he's going to look to set up the shot, or interview someone who just happens to be a survivor, whatever, right? Like, Bob is there as the media, and then like Atlas is going to shoot something or throw something or blow up something, and then maybe kind of feel bad about it, especially if it was a person, right? So how are the players going to interact with the map, and then what would it be like to live in this building? Like, how do people enter and leave? Like you say, is there a reception desk? Like, what's the flow, right? Imagine you're walking through it, and I think this becomes more relevant for like office space, right? Mm-hmm. Or a lab or something. Like, nobody's really worried about the ergonomic flow of the Death Star, right? That's part of the joke. Like, there's no OSHA rules in Star Wars, right? There's no railings, and everything's like a mile up from the bottom of the reactor core.
Right.
Like, of course, because that's Star Wars. That's what you do in sci-fi. But if you're in the real world, again, you want to know, like, where are they storing the garbage? Is there a power source? Is there a generator? Like, because that could be part of it, right? Like, if it's cyberpunk, it could be that the grid is so bad that, like, there's an independent power source for the building. And so I think there are, especially when you have these kind of heist-like adventures where the PCs are going to scout it out, like giving some thought to these things will help you with actually building out whatever kind of map you're going to end up doing, even if it's not an actual map, but something a little more abstract.
Yep. Yeah, when you were talking about flow, you can even start thinking about that there are, in public spaces, usually more than one flow. There's the flow for visitors, and then there's the flow for people who work there. Right. And usually there is some sort of transition or barrier between those two. So if you're talking like a Starbucks, you can't easily get behind the counter, because the counter is there to keep the baristas and the customers apart. There are ways to get back there, but it's not as easy. An office is going to have a reception area and maybe a place for visitors to sit, that sort of thing. And
not
yet,
with that attitude, is it? One thing I will say, I do a lot of theater of the mind. I don't make maps the way that you guys make maps. I've started to because I've been inspired by what you're doing. But a lot of the times with my groups, even the in-person ones, we do it all kind of theater of the mind. And in that case, the biggest piece of advice that I can give you is steal from places you know.
Yes,
100%.
You've been to a Denny's, you know what a greasy spoon is like, use that. Even if you're doing science fiction, steal from the movies, steal from the places you know. There's nothing original under the sun. For many things, unless it's like The Hideout, like in the Dresden game that I have, they've actually built it's an auto garage, but it has a safe room and it's got a salt mine and it's got, it's got all this stuff, but they've built it. So we have a map of it. And we, when we upgrade things, we talk about that because that's part of the base building thing that people enjoy. But like, if they're just, if they're going to the place down the street to go grab a burger, well, that's from the burger place that I went to out in Santa Monica that one time, and I really liked that place, so I'm going to put it in the game.
Right.
Or I base a lot of the games that I run on my local area, either history or real. I put real places in the game, so all I've got to do is describe the real place. And I've had players that go out, wind up at the bar that I was describing, and like, oh my God, I had no idea this was a real place. You nailed it.
Awesome.
This just happened. I didn't know McGinty's was a real place. Oh no, I mean, why make it up if you can just steal it from reality? Because that's so much more vivid.
Yep.
You know, could I sit and draw it out? Yeah, I probably could. But most people know kind of what a bar looks like, you know, and that kind of thing. So
yeah, when I run
playing to their expectations, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, when I run games, I'm usually doing a combination of theater of the mind and maps. Where if something is happening and I didn't anticipate that that's where the players were going, most of the time it's going to be theater of the mind. Or if there's not something where you need to have the tactical, you know, battle map sort of thing, it'll probably going to be just description theater of the mind. As soon as it needs to be an actual battle, if I haven't thought of it, you know, out comes the wet erase, red erase map, and I crudely draw it, and we, you know, put tokens or miniatures on it, and away we go.
That's what I do too. It's, you know, when you get down to the point that you have to start counting squares, okay,
Right. Exactly.
So we'll draw something up, but even in the now this is a little bit different when you get into the online gaming space and you've got your Roll20 and you've got artists doing beautiful work, and you know, maybe you're just going to take their beautiful work and put it in there. And I mean, like, you've bought it and this is legit,
right?
I mean, there's a lot that's free that they give away. So Dyson logos maps, I believe, are all free. They're black and white, but they're all free. And some of the Patreons that are paid will sometimes go, hey, I released this stuff for free today. I actually saw some stuff that was a cyberpunk diner, and they not only released their 1080p and 4K top-down maps, but they also released the animated versions of those. And then there's like a three quarters kind of like you are first person looking in movie of their animated map to kind of like set the tone for your players. And it just kind of showcases like how deep you can go, like that type of Patreon of like, hey, if I'm at the top level, I'm going to get these kind of maps. But if I spend all of this stuff, I get this really cool thing down here at the bottom. And so it's good for them to release that sort of stuff, but it's great for you if you're on a budget and need to grab some stuff. You can certainly grab that.
So I think the other thing with modern maps that you run into, especially I think modern and sci-fi maps, maybe somewhat in fantasy. I like big maps. I think we've talked about big maps before, but like really bringing into effect the ranges, right? So we have a solo in our Cyberpunk campaign. If he was the guy who was focused on a sniper rifle, he'd want to be a couple blocks away lining up the shot, and that would be part of like what the rest of the crew is doing, right? Like he's like Hawkeye on Overwatch, keeping track of like you guys as you go into make a deal in a diner or something like that. And but I'm not going to have a map that's so big that we can include Atlas 5 screens over, right?
Right.
But I might want the map big enough for when he's closed and he's using an assault rifle. And the thing about Cyberpunk is that ranges matter, right? Like if the effective range for a weapon is different between shotguns and pistols and what have you. So as a player, like if you're not accounting for that, then the solo is missing out on some of what makes his character special, right? And so if it's all just a bunch of, net runners and medics and techs and what have you, then or
everybody's using a pistol.
Like, everybody's using a pistol and like, katanas or monowires or what have you, it's less of an issue. But I think accounting for that, being able to switch between theater of the mind or zones, which you're working on Dreams and Machines, right? And Dreams and Machines uses zones.
Yeah, Dreams and Machines uses zones. Fate is the one that I first discovered with it that uses zones. So Spirit of the Century, later on Fate, Dresden Files for sure, because it's based on Fate as well. And usually what I can do there is you can have just a really nice looking map and then you're going to draw some zone areas on it. Or you could even just write, like bathroom, kitchen, dining area, etc., on index cards, and you just lay them out, and they just work that way in terms of zones, and you kind of arrange them in the rough arrangement that diner might be laid out. And
your move ends up accounting for like going from one zone to the next. So I'm in the
right.
like the foyer zone, but there's a balcony zone as well that's overlooking it, and so and like moving from that to that is like your action for the turn or something like that. It's been a
right.
while since I played Fate, but the idea is it's much more abstract, right?
Yes.
And so I think it becomes in some ways like a nice fusion of the two things, right? Because you can still have a nicely rendered view if you wanted to. You can have some level of abstraction, but you can still say, but it takes some amount of time for you to move from one place to another, right?
Yeah, and cinematically, if you're having if say the dining room area is one zone, and if you're having a battle in there, and you want to close with your opponent, you can certainly do so, and there's no extra stuff. You just cinematically describe it.
Right.
If you're shooting guns at each other, you can be ducking behind booths and things like that. You just cinematically describe it, but then if you're trying to move and you're like, hey, I need to get behind the counter, and you can then cinematically describe, jump sliding over the counter and falling down behind it. And, that's maybe part of your move action, as part of Fate or Dreams of Machines sort of thing. And now you're in the index card of the, like behind the counter sort of index card.
Right. It can
and
also be
most weapons are like one zone or two zones away or three zones away, and that's your ranges. There, you don't count it in squares.
Right. So that's what I was going to say. You have like the zone that's right next to the river, and that's close. And then another zone away is like some Greenland and rocks, right?
Yep.
And then that's another zone, and then the tree line is the third zone. And so it's just much more abstract than having to actually like draw out the whole of the battle map down to individual 5x5 squares.
Yeah. And if I was to use like a map that was squares and I wanted to convert it to zones, I'd probably just find the logical zone areas and then put a highlight around that whole area. Especially if it's on a nicer map, I'd probably take a little bit of time, pull it into Photoshop or GIMP or something like that, and put a nice little highlight around those different areas so people could very easily see just by looking at it what the zones were.
So, Chris, what are you doing with your Cyberpunk?
It is almost entirely theater of the mind, even though it's online. I've started to, when I think there's going to be combat, I lay out combat maps. Mm-hmm. And I will grab like some of the free stuff that we've talked about, or we're on some of the same Patreons. So the Solution, I think is his name. I can't remember. Yeah. But take one of his things and lay it out. And I kind of try to keep a couple of those in my back pocket. And do they get reused? Yeah, sometimes they get reused. But for the most part, they spend a lot of time driving around the city. I know the city like the back of my hand, and they know parts of the city really well. So if I describe where a thing is, these are locals, so they know what I'm talking about. And so that just kind of, again, helps with that theater of the mind thing. I'm also very descriptive when I'm running those things, and so I think that helps. Although one thing that I will say is I recently in one of my groups, one of my folks, I don't know that she's been diagnosed yet, but are you familiar with, I think it's pronounced aphantasia? Aphantasia?
Is that the one where you can't visualize or have trouble?
You can't visualize things. Yeah. You have no mental images.
Yes.
And so I've started to do more with pictures, handouts, descriptions, but still, things based on things that they've seen to try to help them, because they can't do theater of the mind.
Right.
And so that's a place where maps and visual aids have been really important, and they've really gotten a lot more out of it because they've been a gamer for 20 years and they didn't understand why they sometimes didn't enjoy it as much as everybody else until they've learned about this. So it's an accessibility issue now too, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it makes me want to go out and grab a lot of the free stuff and like make an archive for us, but arrange it for like, hey, this is Cyberpunk, and these are like 15 different types of diners or 15 different types of offices. So if you need to slap down a map,
Right.
you can just go in and grab it and then throw it into whatever VTT you want to do or print it out or whatever.
That's
I think
not
that'd
a
be
bad
handy.
idea. But I think there's a lot to be said for having stock things that you can use over and
Exactly.
over again. Even if even if it becomes a joke with the players, like in my Rime of the Frost Maiden, I have one snowy field that is
Famed snowy field.
the combat map for everything that takes place outdoors. Number one, I don't enjoy mapping. It's just not a thing that, placing all the trees and all that. So I did it once and I just move everything around and it's fine. If you're really into the mapping thing, go to town. That's great. But for those of us who are like me, who are more, I'm just not artistic in that way. It's easier to take a thing and reuse it over and over again.
That brings up something that I think would be appropriate in game and also hilarious is every time they went into an office, you always lay down the same map.
Well, and that's
they're
kind
all
of the
identical.
joke. I have done that. Yes, and it's a thing that works. So you can make it work for you. But so in my Cyberpunk game, a great deal of it is theater of the mind. When we need to start talking about ranges and shots and that kind of thing, I have a map ready. Whether we use it will be depending on whether the players feel like they need it. If they're having a hard time visualizing it, we pull out the map and we try to figure it out. Especially, as you say, with guns and such, range is important.
Yep,
so
especially in certain systems.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I think we'd all like to know how you all handle modern or near future sci-fi maps. Or what is it? I'm blanking on it, but like vampire
bathrooms
and other things,
urban fantasy.
Urban fantasy. That's what I was looking for. Thank you. How do you do those maps? How do you all do those maps? Also, let us know if you would like to have an archive of all these free maps that are out there that is sorted through. We might actually end up doing that for you guys. But thanks for attending our latest Minion and Future Overlord training. Come on over to layerofsecrets.com for supplemental materials. Also, you can find us on YouTube. I believe it's youtube.com/@layerofsecrets. And head on over there and take a look. I'm just babbling right now. I don't know why. So I do the outros perfectly every time, except for today, maybe. All right. Have a great day, everyone.
Have a great day.